Jeff Todd here for MLB Trade Rumors. I'm going to be joined today by owner and founder of MLB Trade Rumors, Tim Dierkes. We are going to talk about one of baseball's most interesting players, Trevor Bauer, who's out there looking for a one-year contract in free agency. That's his plan. We're going to discuss that. It's a really unique situation. We're also going to give you some predictions. How much will he earn and what team will he sign with? Way too early predictions, but that's what makes it fun. That's coming at the end. Please do go down and subscribe below if you haven't already and click the little bell button so you get notifications of all of our videos. All right, Tim, how's it going?
Pretty good, Jeff.
Well, listen, Trevor Bauer, you've been doing this a long time. I've been at it for a while. We've seen a bunch of, older veterans go out into the market and say, I want a one-year deal. Can you think of any situation like what Bauer is proposing to do where a sort of a mid-prime player who's a very high-level player has gone onto the open market saying, I want a one-year deal?
No, you just don't see it. You see it in the aging veteran. Famously, Roger Clemens did it repeatedly and scored a pretty big contract. I think it was $28 million prorated more than a decade ago. So that did happen, but that was not a player who's going into his age 30 season like Bauer. Typically, we see the pillow contracts, players coming off a bad year, players coming off an injury. We see those every single year. We do not see a healthy, solid number two starter like this at a young age go and say, I will only take a one-year deal.
All right, so we know that teams discount what they're willing to pay on an annual basis when you spread the deal out over a long period of time and add more guaranteed years. That just stands to reason. You're taking on more risk for those future years. There's a bit of a countervailing element there where you'd say, yeah, you also are spreading the risk of injury over a longer term. But I think it's pretty commonly accepted that, if you want a longer deal, you're probably going to get a little bit less in terms of your average annual salary on a deal. So do you think that there's any kind of like a premium here that Bauer could get because he's going to be saying, hey, I'm a mid-prime guy, I'm a rare opportunity to have on a one-year deal? Can he expect like a really significant premium on what he would get versus a longer-term contract?
Well, I think that we've seen the top of the market would be $36 million for Gerrit Cole, and that was actually over a 9-year term. So if you think about what might Cole have done had he done what his former teammate Bauer has decided to do, which is limit himself to the one-year deal, then he would have easily been over $40 million, and you could make a case that somebody might have coughed up $50 million for 1 year of Gerrit Cole. So I think Bauer will get paid extra for this. If he was maybe a $22, $23 million guy, then maybe there's another $5 million in there for him for kind of mitigating the risk for a team. I don't think it's too much more excessive than that, though.
Well, now Cole and Bauer were teammates at UCLA. They hated each other. It's kind of one of those things. Go read about it. It's a whole story in and of itself. But Cole hit the market and got paid huge money because he was coming off of 2 exceptional seasons. Not the case right now for Bauer. Bauer was awesome in 2018, but really took a step back again last year. Tim, I have some opinions on this. I'll let you launch into it first, though. I mean, just how good of a pitcher, on a true talent basis, is Bauer? I mean, what is the sort of starting point here?
Well, we've talked about this a lot internally on the staff, and I think we've kind of settled that he is a very good pitcher, maybe a number 2, a sub-4 ERA type of pitcher, even though he's only done that in 1 season. So maybe a 380 type of ERA pitcher based on his skills. He strikes out a lot of guys. He walks a fair bit, but he has been home run prone outside of that stellar 2018 season. And of course, with kind of the rabbit ball, a lot of guys are homer prone, but Bauer doesn't get a ton of ground balls, and he had a really rough time in his 10 starts with the Reds. I don't think that teams are going to look too closely at that 6.39 ERA. I think that they can move past that and look at his skills, but he's also not a front of the rotation guy based on his career to date.
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting, is how reliant Bauer would be and maybe will be if we get a 2020 season on what he can show in the platform year, because he was so good in 2018, but go look at his home run rates over the years. and they were always pretty high, and then they dropped in 2018. And I was looking at all the StatCast numbers and trying to dig in on what happened there, and it kind of looks like the correct narrative to me is that, Bauer actually did get a bit lucky in 2018. A lot of balls that he was giving up hit the same launch angle, the same, exit velocity off of his four-seam fastball did not leave the yard in 2018. Only 4 home runs off of his four-seamer that year. And then those same, the same launch angle and everything else with that gopher ball were going out. He gave up 20 home runs in 2019 on his four-seam fastball. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between, but to me, a lot of pitchers adopted Bauer's approach of bringing that high fastball, then dropping breakers, lower in the zone. Maybe hitters have come around on it. Maybe he got a bit lucky in 2018, but he's going to really have to show not just that he still has the physical skills, because he's had that all along. He's still throwing just as hard. His pitches all move. We know that he goes in and develops these pitches, through his intensive techniques, but he's going to have to show that he's able to get out ahead of the league again. And I think he still has a lot to show in 2020, even if it's a partial season.
Yeah, I think a partial season would be huge for him. As you alluded to, he's famous for being innovative and working on his pitches. He was one of the first players to go and work with driveline baseball. So I do think that I guarantee you that this offseason he's been working through some of the problems that developed in the 2019 season. And so I do think you can give him some credit for being able to design his pitches and almost be, a bit of his own pitching coach.
Well, and some of that sort of originality, creativity goes beyond just the pure baseball stuff, Tim. I mean, I think that by and large teams will value that and appreciate that. Obviously, we all know that, the Rapsodo and all these different technologies that I can hardly keep up with are now permeating the game. But there are some other interesting and creative things going on here with Bauer. Not only is he a personality and somewhat of a controversial one at times, but he also is kind of taking an unusual approach, not just with the contract situation, but with his representation, with starting a media company. I mean, how do all these sort of, let's say, unique aspects of Bauer play into his free agency?
It's very interesting. He has a new agent, Rachel Luba, a former friend of his from UCLA who graduated early, started her own agency at age 27. So that's fascinating. Like you said, he's got this media company. He's trying to kind of put himself out there. So it's just a very interesting situation. And on top of that, her agency is trying to break the mold a little bit of the typical 5% fee structure. I think they're leaning more toward an hourly rate with a reduced percentage and some stuff like that. So everything about his free agency is unique.
Yeah, he's going to be out there, putting himself on the market in a completely different way from the outset. I mean, let's talk money a little bit. We've seen, some of these guys on the bounce back type of a contract, like the one Rick Porcello signed, they'll top $10 million. Even a guy that had a really wretched season. I don't think we want to assume that Bauer is going to have another poor showing in 2020. We want to assume that his true talent will be reflected on the field. But how high do these salaries really go for pitchers like this, in this high quality but not superstar level? In my mind, I'm thinking about all the guys that have taken qualifying offers, the way that Jake Odorizzi did last year. You go back to the Clemens, but there's a bunch of other guys. I think Andy Pettit, Hiroki Kuroda are a couple that come to mind that signed in that sort of qualifying offer-ish range of 16, 18 million bucks. That's what Cole Hamels got this past offseason. To me, I'm not sure how high teams are really going to go for a one-year guy, especially with a market that's full of a lot of guys that are sort of in this same rough level of ability, I think. Robbie Ray, you've got Jose Quintana, Masahiro Tanaka, there's a few other guys, Odorizzi being one of them as well, in that, like you said, sub-4 ERA historically. I don't know, Tim. I'm not sure that I'm can envision anything like Bauer himself has sort of floated of like $40-45 million worth of value.
Yeah, and don't forget James Paxton will be on the market as well. He's arguably a better per inning pitcher. But I do think that the Cole Hamels contract at $18 million sets an interesting precedent, because you do kind of ask, well, how much better is Bauer than Cole Hamels? And I think he is better, and of course he's a lot younger, but is he $10 million better? And I'd probably say no. But another thing to keep in mind too is that free agency doesn't necessarily care about precedent. Like when we were trying to make the prediction on Garrett Cole, I don't think we got anywhere close to $324 million at $36 million a year. And the reality of it is that free agency is just a bidding war. So if Bauer has 3 teams that are just gung-ho to get him, then that's when the price just gets driven up, and it really doesn't matter what Cole Hamels signed for.
Yeah, that's a great point, and there's many aspects to the market like that I think tends to get overlooked, because if you replayed free agency, you could start it back over and redo it. I think it would turn out differently every single time, just like a fantasy baseball draft might, but even more so because there's so many factors. So it'll be interesting to see. Bauer is not going into this the way that all players that have settled for one-year deals have gone into it. Usually they go in looking for big money, and they might back into a one-year deal, like say Irvin Santana or Dallas Keuchel in the past have kind of had to be forced into it. Bauer's going right out up front and saying, hey, here I am, come and get me, let's let the bidding begin. So, that's going to be interesting to watch. I do think it matters how many teams are involved. I don't foresee a lot of, true all-out bidding, raising paddles and driving the price up, but I do see the potential for quite a few teams to be interested here, Tim.
Oh yeah, I could see at least half the teams in baseball having some level of interest. I just think, the old saying, there's no such thing as a bad one-year deal. So there's tons of teams that are going to jump in and try to offer him something, maybe a bit above the qualifying offer, low 20s. And we'll see if somebody wants to, jump all the way up to 30 million. That's just such an unknown at this point.
Well, it's notable too, I think, that some of these deals we've already talked about, look where they're coming from, and look what teams are doing now on this, the latest iteration of sort of this analytical revolution. I think we are seeing a lot of teams going for the one-year deals. That's the Josh Donaldson contract, which is the biggest one in recent memory on a one-year deal, $23 million. That's from the Braves. They also signed Hamels and Marcell Ozuna to one-year deals, lucrative one-year deals. We've seen the Brewers going out and signing a lot of one-year contracts. Teams that are trying to find that sweet spot of staying competitive, staying busy, they'll spend big money. The Brewers are mostly signing cheaper deals, but they did sign Yasmani Grandal. So there are a lot of teams that are willing to plunk down serious cash on a one-year deal. And then, of course, there are the bigger market teams that can easily afford to do so. So, given all of that, Tim, I'm going to put it to you. Let's make some predictions. Let's put ourselves out there a little bit here. Let's start with the money. What do you got on dollars here for Mr. Bauer?
I'm going to go 1 year, $28.1 million. I'm going to put him just past that Clemens mark that I mentioned before. I think then he'll clearly hold the record for a one-year free agent deal and be well beyond Donaldson, which some might consider as the benchmark there. And I think based on from what Bauer has said, kind of moving the market forward for players is just as important as the total amount of money. If he was going for top dollar, he would certainly look at multi-year deals. So he definitely wants to move the market forward, and it's going to be important to him to kind of reach certain benchmarks.
Yeah, I guess for me, the fact that he's willing to throw a lot of innings and kind of be a mercenary and let teams put him out there and get what they can out of him for 1 year, I give value there. I recognize that. I think there's some value in his unique analytical approach to pitching, and I get that. At the same time, we're talking about a guy that is going to be turning down a qualifying offer. We're supposing, He's going to have to cost draft compensation as a result. When you're giving that up for a 1-year commitment, knowing you're not going to be able to turn around and give him a qualifying offer the next offseason to recoup that, that drives it down. So I'm going to take the under on your number. I think yours is definitely within range of what I see as plausible. I'm going with just a straight $25 million. Maybe the 1-year bump isn't so great because, you spread it out over a few years. That way, if he does get hurt, you still get some value back. Betting it all on 1 year, is a big risk. So I'm going to stick with 25, a little bit over what Donaldson got, a much better player coming off of an injury-plagued season. That's my guess. So how about a team prediction, Tim?
Well, before we get to that, I want to bring up something that you alluded to, which is Bauer's professed goal of pitching on 3 days rest for his new team. So I think we've kind of argued about how plausible that is, how many teams might be willing to do it. But he has talked about making 45 starts for his new team, and the idea that, that team can just wear him down with little concern. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic, and I think that a team looking for a workhorse, even if they're not going to grant him 40 starts, which, would be fascinating, I think that they can maybe hope for 220 innings instead of the usual 175 that we might be seeing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I think that does tilt the balance a bit. He has shown that he can throw over 200 innings. He did last year, and he's willing to do so. And as Bauer himself says, the incentives are lined up between player and team in that situation. So I can definitely envision it. So does that impact your analysis in terms of the teams that are most likely to end up, being highly interested in Bauer?
A little bit, and I think it's mutual too. I think what Bauer wants is very important in his free agency. This is when the player finally gets to choose his team. So I think he's going to look very hard for a situation that he likes that meets his many different criteria. So my pick is the Twins. They have a good prior relationship between President of Baseball Operations Derek Falvey and Bauer back from when they were both pitching nerds employed by the Indians. So I think that connection is interesting. And I think also that the Twins have shown that they are willing to be very innovative when it comes to pitching. They're data-driven with their pitching. They hired Wes Johnson out of the University of Arkansas. And it's something we don't really see as a college coach jumping straight into that role in the majors as Johnson has. So I think that checks the box. I think they're a contender, obviously, which is important to Bauer. And I think that they actually could entertain him making a ton of starts. And furthermore, I think that the payroll would not really be a problem for the Twins. They've got Odorizzi, as we've talked about, Homer Bailey, Rich Hill. If you look at what they're paying those guys or are supposed to pay those guys in 2020, it is about $28 million. And the Twins are nowhere near the competitive balance tax. And they also just did win a bidding war on Josh Donaldson. So they kind of, I think, shook off that image of the team that might come in second or third on free agent bidding. So I really like the match here with Bauer and the Twins.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The Twins have also gone out a few times and landed, 1 or 2 year contracts that looked like great value. We know they're hunting for that sort of thing. So they also jump in that mix of clubs that have adopted that approach of let's build around a core by bringing in really high quality players on short-term deals to maintain our flexibility. So my choice is kind of based on similar considerations, and I'm going with the Red Sox. It's a bit of a risk to choose them, I think, because they have a new leader of president of baseball operations there, Chaim Bloom. We haven't seen him do much other than trade Mookie Betts. So maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but my guess is that Bloom is going to take that Rays mentality and he's going to bring it to Boston, similar to the way that Andrew Friedman has with the Dodgers. And apart from investing in true superstars, he's going to be very willing to spend money if it doesn't mean hamstringing the long-term, flexibility for that organization. So in this case, I see the Red Sox dipping under the competitive balance tax, which they're going to have to do after this 2020 season gets underway. They'll dip under the line, I think. I think that they're going to then be willing and very interested in not having too many, uncompetitive seasons, non-competitive seasons in a row. I think that Bloom is going to see a guy like Bauer as a really great payroll fit because you put him in there for 1 year, you get what you can out of him, and then you move on, or you re-sign him, you revisit it. The thing is with the Red Sox, their rotation is absolutely certain to require supplementation. Even if all goes well, you're going to have Eduardo Rodriguez and maybe Chris Sale fronting this staff for half a season if he gets back. Who knows what Nathan Eovaldi's going to look like, and the rest of the staff is mostly in question in the future. So I see that as a good fit. I think that Bauer might even come in and help a guy like Eovaldi. I think that organization is going to be forward-looking. They're going to appreciate the pitch development dynamics and the analytics that Bauer brings. So that's my choice.
I like that pick a lot. I agree with the Dave Bush hire. I think they're looking to kind of not miss the boat on analytics and pitching, and his ability to be a bit of an assistant pitching coach to the other guys, I think is important too. So I love the pick. I could see it happening.
All right. Well, listen, Tim, we're committed. I think clearly, no matter what happens, if Bauer signs with one of the teams we chose, we're going to come back here. We're going to tout this. Otherwise, we'll just pretend this never happened.
Exactly. That's the way to do it.
All right. Good chat as always, Tim. Thanks a lot.
All right. My pleasure.